Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop around the Generative AI Challenge. And today's workshop is going to be, we're going to cover the back end of the design process, and then also answer any questions, as we only have 1 week before the deadline now. So it's September 7th next week. So I would like to really encourage you to, after I'm done with the few slides, to open up for questions, and this is a good opportunity to share them, no matter how simple or simple the questions are. Just go ahead, and then if there are things that require additional depth or require more information that we can provide later, we would be happy to do that. So again, this is very important, because we can help you cover anything that is in your way to be able to submit and successfully participate in the competition. So I'm gonna share the screen now, and we'll go from there. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and good evening to those who are joining from different places. So today, this is a refresher of the competition page on our website. If you haven't looked at it recently, take a look again, just because it's important to remind ourselves with the criteria and anything critical related to competition. One thing I will always keep repeating as many times as we talk is the importance of documentation on top of the design completion. So if the design is complete and it is submitted, but the documentation is not enabling other people in the community to be able to reproduce your work, it will be contributing negatively to the score. But if you just always think about it as you're doing that, even if it's as simple as, maybe you can create an automation file, maybe something that allows somebody else other than you to be able to reproduce your work. It could be through automation, or it could be through clear instructions on what to do. So this is very important, because that's the main goal of the competition, is to enable the community to learn from each other and share designs and approaches. So one important update today is that the judging panel of the competition welcomes Dr. Hammond Pierce, so he's assistant professor at University of North South Wales, Sydney School of Engineering, and he's the winner of the previous or his team was the winner from NYU for the first challenge. And so the judgment panel now, you will find that on the competition webpage that has been updated, and he's joining us. It adds a lot of technical depth to the discussions, and also he will be invited also for additional technical guest speakership and other members of his team to share with the community in the future. So to remind the just high level what the process is going to look like. So what you're doing is that you're using a generative AI assistant, and here the examples are used Bard and ChatGPT, but they're not limited to that. So the rules don't limit you to use Bard or ChatGPT. The idea is you're going to use the assistant to generate the RTL for your design, and then you're going to use OpenLane to harden that design and submit it into a fabless website, which we will have it integrated and taped out, and then the winners of the competition they will receive the hardware to be able to test and their designs. So this is the overall picture, and as I mentioned again, to be able to, especially the part in the first part in the design aspect, having that to be completely reproducible and is something that's very important. So by zooming in on OpenLane, so this is actually, we're trying to focus today on addressing any questions related to the back end, and it is a very high level, but so you've already seen this picture so many times, but this is the overview on OpenLane. But the OpenLane takes you to different steps of the chip implementation or the block implementation, and these steps start with synthesis, and the synthesis here maps your RTL into the technology library that is being targeted, which is in this case SKY130 PDK or library, standard cell library. And that synthesis step, all of these steps are actually part of the OpenLane sequence of steps for creating the design. The next one is the power and floor planning in general. So these are places. This is where the blocks, the macros or pieces of your design are being placed in across the design. And third step is is if you look at the animation, I'm sorry, this is moving too fast. So if you look at the intent of the chip, this is on the left hand side. So there is a pad, or the block die or the footprint of the user project wrapper, and then after you start adding the power and the floor plan has happened, you can see there is the red lines here showing that the part. Now, the next step is the placement, which is basically taking the netlist that has from the get level netlist down to where it fits inside the rails for the digital design. And you'll see here, just as this is a rough placement, and it's just for making the point. And the next is the routing, and I'm sorry, there's two types of placements. There's the global level and detailed, and you can see there are two different steps that happen in sequence to optimize the design. Then the clock tree synthesis, which is creating a tree that actually clocks the different sequential logic that exists in the design. It needs to be balanced. There's actually one of the tests that are you should be very evident is actually to see the tree in a balanced way in some sort of a network tree diagram like this. Then the next step is the routing, and that takes you to takes the placed cells, connects them, wire them. After the clock tree synthesis has happened, because it takes priority in the design. And then last step is the sign off, and which has the group of checks for manufacturability, including DRC, LVS, as well as the timing analysis to confirm that after placement and routing, that the timing is still meeting requirements with margin, so it doesn't have any hold violations or setup violations. So this is just the picture now. As I mentioned, the blocks are going to be integrated into the chip, the Caravelle chip, and handed over through our system after the competition is complete. And I'll stop here and pause. for questions, and also Andrea, if you would like to invoke the poll at this point, that would be good.
Okay, got it.
And I just dropped a message into chat just to say that if everything that Mohammed said sounded scary and complicated, that I would expect that for most AI generated designs, they're going to be small simply because the AI isn't, unless you're doing a heck of a lot of work, which you had only a couple weeks to do anyway, that it's probably going to be a small design. You could probably just drop it into the user project wrapper, take all of the defaults, and it's just as likely that you're going to come out with a working design that way.
Good point. Thank you, Tim.
In other words, you may not ever have to worry about details of floor planning and timing closure. It may just all work.
It's actually, maybe I didn't, yeah, you're right. It's a very important point to say that these steps happen within OpenLane automatically. And if, as Tim said, if you keep it with the defaults, then your design will gonna be fine and go through the steps.
Would say don't forget the IO defaults and the output enables.
Yeah, well, if you follow the instructions for the user project wrapper, then those things are all part of the basic instructions.
So please go ahead and feel free to put the questions in the Q&A section. Just by the way, just the webpage that was shared, Andrea, is pointing towards OpenLane 2, I think. Yes, looking at it. So can you, Mohammed, can you comment on this? Is this something that you want the team here or the community to incorporate in the challenge?
Well, it's optional because eventually it's not the official flow yet for ChipIgnite shuttles. However, actually it's ready to go, and actually we demonstrated that we can use it to create projects which eventually can be integrated into Caravelle and can be submitted for ChipIgnite. And eventually there's a dedicated repo eventually that basically shows how to do this with all the instructions and all the details. So
it's in an open beta, but it's definitely not mandatory.
Yes, yeah, it's a very important point. Yeah,
and the default is still OpenLane 1, so it would be helpful if we reshared that URL.
Yeah, I am actually doing that. So yes, at this point, if you start from here, the Caravelle user project, this will install and deliver and put together all the dependencies.
Yeah, so Caravelle user project example, eventually it's still basically using OpenLane 1.
Yeah.
We have OpenLane 2 beta, as mentioned. Eventually, it's if you are basically want to have basically a little bit rough rides, eventually you can go with OpenLane 2, basically just to try, because actually OpenLane 2 gives you like more flexibility, but eventually if you're not familiar with it will take time to learn basically how to use it. But we show basically how to use it. Again, if you just basically want to get the job done, do the implementation, eventually just follow the instructions in the user project repo, where basically shows how the example can be hardened and integrated into Caravelle, and eventually this is good enough, as mentioned by Tim and basically like to get the job done. And I think most of the time you will be spending eventually is like integrating HDL into Caravelle itself by putting it in the user's wrapper, and how to verify this, whether this basically done through basically applying a stimuli on the IOs and basically observe output on the IOs, or basically by interacting with the SOC that basically which is on Caravelle in the management area.
And Mohammed, there's a question whether we are going to have a third contest.
The answer is yes. So we're targeting the next ChipIgnite shuttle, which will be in November. So the date, Jeff, I don't think if you can post that date accurately, that would be great. But the answer is yes. Our goal is to continue to drive that and expand that effort to also include other companies that are in sponsorships. So that's our aim. We're leading that in the community, and the community is learning and we're learning, and we wanted to just make that even bigger. So, questions, barriers. So, Andy, you mentioned
it's a very quiet group today.
I was going to say, it looks like everybody knows exactly what they're doing, and nobody needs anybody's help.
Yeah. So, Andy, since you mentioned the I/O configuration and the defaults, could you just verbally just add more context to this?
I would give it to Tim to get it right because he's done it so many times. But the key point is to make sure that you actually configure all the IOs that you use on the outside edge of the chip, so that if you're using them as outputs, the output enables are appropriately enabled, and you've configured the defaults for those IOs to drive the IO standard or capability that you want. And I'll let Tim give the detail on that.
Well, technically, it's not possible to complete the submission because the pre-check is going to catch it if you have not done it, but there is a user defines.v Verilog file, and that is what you use to configure what the default state of the GPIOs is on power up. And the original purpose of that is to be able to set up the user project so that it can operate without the SoC processor coming up. So you can run your project completely independent of the processor. Normally, it doesn't really matter because you can run a little program. It will configure the IOs to do whatever you want at startup time. But we have made it so that that there is, as Mohammed is showing in this screenshot here, is that there are in this file all these definitions for the outputs that are initially set to quote invalid, and that will raise a error when you try to submit if it hasn't been changed. But typically your project is going to have straight up digital. It's going to be either input or output, and you're probably just going to change each of those as appropriately to a digital input or a digital output for the user domain. Actually, I would like to mention one thing, which is it's something that is not mandatory. It is something that can make your life a lot harder if you don't do it, which is to avoid using the GPIOs 1 through 6, unless you absolutely need all the GPIOs. Avoid the lower ones. They are on the development board. They are attached to the FTDI chip, which means that you have to go to a lot of trouble to shut the FTDI chip off and reconnect them to something that you're working on. And it's not impossible to do. It just makes life hard. So if you just stick with GPIO 7 and up, your life will be easier. Just one of those handy tips.
Yeah, we covered, this is Jeff, so we covered some of that in the let me get my video on. We covered some of that in the last recording as well, the last webinar. So probably be worth, if you haven't or seen it, go back and let me share the
yeah, please go ahead. And just a question for you, Tim. So I noticed here that the user configs start from IO index 5.
You're actually not allowed to configure the ones that are connected to the SPI, because otherwise that makes it really, really hard. Yeah. Well, actually, it makes it impossible. You can brick the chip if you were to change those from the default state, because then you wouldn't be able to reach the SPI flash to program it.
So these are the ones that the additional 2 that you'd exclude in this case.
Those are
they're connected to the UART, transmit and receive. So if you want to write a program that allows your host to communicate with your project or with the SOC through the UART, then it's nice to have those around.
So there's a playlist here called, I think it's called Generative AI, AI Generative Design Contest. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find kind of all the videos from these webinar series that we've been doing. The last one we kind of went into detail around, I think the last one or the one before we went into detail around integrating your design, but also going through the project submission. But notably, what we're just commenting on, one of them is setting the power on defaults, which is there is a check to make sure you've done that correctly, so you won't be able to submit if you haven't. The one that you do want to make sure you do correctly is if you're using these, you're connecting to IO pads. There's a 3-wire interface to those. There's an input and output and an OEB. If you want to propagate the signal, in order to propagate the signal on input or output, you have to configure OEB correctly, right? So it either has to be tied up, tied down, or connected to logic if you're using bidirectional signaling through that pad. Right, so that's that I believe we do have now checks in place that will alert you or identify if you haven't done it properly, but that is something to be aware of that some people have missed on design submissions in the past. This is in the user project wrapper.v in Verilog RTL.
Yeah, could you stick that in the chat?
Yep. And I'll drop a link for the videos as well.
We just need to change the thumbnails for you and I, so the videos wouldn't have just us on the thumbnails.
I didn't drop it to everyone here. I'll try it again. There we go. And then the videos. Let's see. I guess it's the best way to reference this. Okay. So that should get you to the playlist for the series.
Great.
So there is a question, will you allow to additionally embed third-party IP if license allows?
Is the third-party IP open source license, or is the third-party IP got a constrained license? And we probably need to get that written back in a Q&A window rather than the chat.
Open
chat originally.
You mentioned open source.
Yeah,
The answer was open source.
Then yes, I don't think there's any restriction at all on embedding an open source IP.
Yep.
And there was a question that was answered by Tim. It'll be good to read the question and then answer. The question is, will software support be taken into account during project evaluations? We are writing a C library, but we don't think we will complete and test it in time.
Which I answered that it's basically up to the judges. Obviously, if you have a solution and there are bits and pieces missing from it, then at least as far as the challenge goes, you'll be judged on the basis of how complete it is versus other entries. And I can't say what the judges are going to decide on that. It won't, if it's a piece of software that drives the project and it's missing, then it's not going to prevent you from submitting, because we aren't checking for that specifically. Obviously, because of the open source, because it's open source, we wish to have everything complete, all of the design files, because if it's dependent on a C function to work and that C function is missing from the repository, then obviously it's difficult for people to reproduce.
Usually there's a delay time until the questions start to appear. So hopefully this is the start of that. Once again, any points or things that you've tried and you might think that they're not going to work the way you expect them or the way we just mentioned them, please bring it up, raise it here and on the Slack channel as well. And if you haven't started already, please start the project on eFabless so that you will it will basically record it as a prep for the submission. The GitHub repository submission to the shuttle at eFabless.com is one aspect, but the actual submission needs to happen on eFabless website as you create the project and fill out the forms and be able to do the tape out project all the way to the tape out process.
And you can repeat and rerun the tape out as many times as you like up to the submission deadline. So there's no penalty to do it early. You encourage you to do it early, I guess, and get a heads up on any potential issues.
Maybe we can give 1 more minute for questions, and if they don't, we can call it a day.
Yep.
Has anybody got issues with specific aspects of the flow that they would like help with, or specific aspects of submission or design cleaning that they'd like help with? Bear in mind that we're here to try to enable a competition to forward generative AI based design development, and we're not intending to penalize or punish anybody that gets help in the process of doing that submission. Our goal is to try to help any of you do a submission as complete or incomplete as it is. And get you to the point where you've gotten a design to tape out, starting with AI. And if anybody needs help with anything at all, please, just pop up either now, and we'll be very happy to help you, or on the Slack channels, and we'll get you moving as fast as we possibly can.
I had problems, this is in the chat, but I had problems with using the tool chain, but I had a lot of help from the Slack community.
Thank you, Lefteris.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, we're open to working with people directly. If you guys have an issue that you're struggling to get a design through submission, we're happy to log on a call and just go through your specific design issue with you.
Yeah, and some people made us aware that they had some issues setting up the tools. Anything, no matter how simple it is, that could actually stand in your way, just please signal it. And as Andy said, there's nothing here about no one is going to be penalized for asking for help.
No element of the help process is going to come into the judgment criteria. So feel free to ask for as much help as you want. We're not going to code the design for you, but we're more than willing to help you get it submitted. Yeah,
and as it's important to know that the judging panel is actually it's not from eFabless.
Yeah, it's not us.
This is very
They're highly independent and very opinionated.
Yeah.
There's one more comment I thought of after I was highlighting the three wire interface on those IO pads and the need to connect IO OEB, right? That OEB of course is inverted. So
do you want to signal something on the screen to just for visual?
I can bring that back up again, sure. Yeah. Just to avoid potential issues. Sorry, I'm doing too many things. here it is. Sorry. Okay, so again, this OEB signal that's inverted, right? So output enable bar, it's means high for input, low for output. Just to make sure you get that correct. All right, I'll drop that in the comment in the chat.
But we do have it. We do have a check for that now. So if you do it wrong,
Just hopefully that check should be working now. So
it will get flagged.
yeah, but I would definitely pay attention to that and make sure.
High for input only, low for output or bidirectional.
Well, connected. You
Yeah.
have to toggle it, right? For
Yeah.
bidirectional.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. Show up again.
Maybe do that again.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're excited to see you here, and also excited to be able to see you in the submission queue. And as I repeat again, please reach out to us for even so on the channel, the group channel, or directly. We have no problem working on that together on case-by-case basis. Thank you.